back. Yes.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. It's always a great pleasure to have this returning guest. You see Andy Schectman with me. He is the CEO of Miles Franklin Precious Metals, and he's here tonight live. I think he's still alive. He's had a long day here. We are at the Rule Symposium on Natural Resource Investing in Boca Raton, Florida. And it's been a long day for Andy in particular. Besides the usual crowds outside the Miles Franklin booth here, he's had 2 main stage speaking engagements today and a sponsored lunch giving information to people. So it's been a huge day for him, but he still stayed over here to go live with us for answer your viewers' questions about the topics that you have, whether it's about gold, silver, the precious metals markets in general, the world financial situation, the Brics nations turning away from the US dollar, and on and on and on. So any question is fair. Well, we can't get them to them all necessarily, but anyway, Andy, thanks for joining me.
Dunnigan, it's great to be here. It's great to be here live with you. And hi, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. It was a long day, but I always look forward to these. I was telling Dunnigan during dinner this evening, he and I shared a dinner together, and I said I find it almost therapeutic to be able to come and to talk to like-minded people like Dunnigan and all of you out there. And I'm sure many of you understand what it's like to live the lonely existence of having feelings that most people really aren't able to converse with you about. So I look forward to these, and it's good to be here, especially with you here together live. So
people often talk to us about them being the black sheep at the supper table, but it's interesting because after what we all went through last year with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and then the last couple of months with multiple bank failures, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th largest banks in the US going bust, as well as Credit Suisse in Germany. People told us that at the Easter table, they had fewer of their family members talking to them like they were the black sheep and actually being interested for the first time. So
yeah, I believe that. I think that's what will happen is more and more people will understand. And that's why so few people really excel in investing, because they follow the herd. It's if you ask Rick Rule, and we're at Rick's convention here, where did you make your most money? He will tell you it was buying items that were out of favor, that were not conventional wisdom. And by the time it became obvious to accumulate it, it was far too late. It had already accentuated itself. And that's what happens very often. It is being early in something, understanding the fundamentals, taking a position in it as a result, using your gut maybe as your guide, because a lot of the things that we talk about at this show or on our Tuesday podcast are things that are not conventionally thought about or talked about. And that's why I like being here so much, the ability to talk with you about it. And the live streams are my favorite, get to answer questions from people who have stuff on their mind.
if you guys had been here live in person with Andy, you would see the crowds of his adoring fans who gather at the booth after each of his speeches, and people tell me often that he's a rock star, and you guys tell me that as well. We've got a question here from Sarge 27271 who says, what's Andy's take on France asking for an observer's seat at the August summit? So just clarifying what the August summit is.
Sure, the August summit is the Brics meeting in Johannesburg. I'd like to talk a little bit about that, about the meeting in and of itself. But in terms of France asking and being denied, it's a big deal. It became a big deal when they completed a $1 billion liquid natural gas deal with the United Arab Emirates and paid in yuan. It became a big deal when Macron went to China, met with Xi Jinping, and left signing a 51-point agreement ranging from 5G technology to military engagement. It became very obvious to me that the G7 nations were starting to break up a little bit. And when you see him or saw him asked to be part of the summit in Johannesburg, it became very obvious to me. And for whatever reason, they did not allow him to go. But I think it sets a precedent that there will come a point in this journey where it becomes every man and woman for themselves. And I think what you saw there was a glimpse of that, with not only Macron breaking free from the dollar and placing a massive liquid natural gas deal outside the dollar in yuan, but also asking for admittance to what is a massive pushback against the dollar hegemony.
Yeah, and how's that for what a difference a year makes? Because it was the Western Europe was supposed to eschew Russian energy altogether, and here suddenly there's the warming of that, the admission, I think, on the part of the Europeans that they need that energy. So.
It's a big deal, and it's just as big of a deal, really, when you see Mexico, our ally to the south, formally applying to Brics. Little by little, then all at once. We call that logarithmic decay. That was part of my presentation today, where little by little, and then all at once, things change, whether it be socially or economically or financially. And that's what we're seeing. And when you see our allies who are there with us in 2022 and sanctioning Putin and the whole supporting the whole pushback against Russia to break free from that and to side with the Brics is something that shouldn't be, I think, overlooked. It's a big deal.
I'm responding, getting a link here. Paul Helensky asks, Andy was on fire today. Paul was here in person. I actually did an interview with him as well today. Thank you, Paul. Paul says someone has to post those talks in full at some point. Then again, better than that, here you go. Here's the link, you guys. And this is the conference is not only in person, it's also virtual. If you sign up for the virtual conference, which is much cheaper than the in-person conference, you get 6 months access to all of the things. And all of the talks, I'm gonna put that right up now. I'm gonna pin it at the top of the screen here so you guys have that. And you click on that link and your wish will come true.
One of the things that I talked about today, very impassioned, I guess, was, there's been a lot of talk about Jim Rickards. Jim Rickards is here, and I can't wait to talk to him. But Jim came out and said, then again, that on August 22nd, the Brics would issue a gold-backed currency. And there's been some pushback against that. And look, what Jim said to me also in that presentation that he gave, or the letter that he wrote, was more significant in the respect of the coalition of countries that he surmises will join together at this summit, namely the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the Eurasian Economic Union. This is a massive deal, and here's why. If you Google how many countries have signed up for Brics, you're going to see 41 everywhere you look. But when you count the countries, you'll get 25. Jim says that you're going to see the Eurasian Economic Union and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization join in with the Brics. This is no small deal. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization represents 60% of the Eurasian landmass and 40% of human population. You throw in the Belt Road Initiative, which is 75% of human population, 152 or 3 countries, 50% of global GDP. With the Brics, you have the majority of human population coalescing together. But what the crux of my presentation was today is all of these people, who I respect, many of them, who say that, well, I don't think the world will change August 22nd, even if they do announce a gold-backed currency immediately, it won't change. And I said, I agree with that. But nobody is saying what I've been saying for the past 3 years. They are ignoring the most important part of this entire coalition, and that is the Saudi kingdom and the moves that they have made. No one is talking about this. It's all I've talked about for 3 years. And when Saudi Arabia, which is the linchpin of the dollar hegemony, decided to join Brics, it was a big deal. When they joined the Belt Road Initiative with all of the OPEC countries, it was a very big deal. When they decided to join the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, it became a massive deal. When they joined the Brics New Development Bank, it became a huge deal. And when they told people at Davos they're open to taking other currencies for oil, it became an enormous deal. The point is simply this. When Saudi Arabia flips the switch, and by extension, OPEC decides to move with Saudi Arabia away from accepting the dollar in accordance with their relationship with the majority of human population who isn't going green, and add that to the Brics, it becomes a huge, huge deal. One without the other is only telling half the story. And I think that's what people need to understand. I've been consistent on that. The Brics is the icing on the de-dollarization cake, if you look at it that way. But the loss of the petro standard when every single country in the world has had to own dollars since 1974 in order to buy oil. For 50 years, they've all had to stockpile dollars. And if Saudi Arabia and OPEC says, listen, you guys, you guys are going green. You signed an executive order. By 2030, you say you're going to be 50% green. By 2050, almost entirely green. So we respect that. Have a good life. We want you to. Thanks for the memories, but we are joining with the folks around the world that comprise the majority of human population that aren't. And as a result, we're not going to take dollars anymore. And when that happens like that, everything changes. And I think that's the part that is not being talked about enough in people who push back against what the Brics really means to the fate of the dollar.
We've got another question from Fazdal. What does Andy think about buying precious metal miner ETFs? Those are really out of favor.
Yeah, I mean, there's what is it, GDX and GDXJ. I mean, look, I think that the mining shares, if you take the capitalization of every single mining share on the planet and you give it a value, it's less than that of Coca-Cola, I believe. So mining shares represent enormous potential. In the world that I envision the stock market ultimately, as rates rise or spike as a result of an event that would precipitate that, all stocks are going to take a hit. And I think if you put your assets into a pyramid, the way the Swiss have for 300 years, with the base of your pyramid being stable, sound investments, precious metals, cash, paid for real estate, earning a very low yield but are safe, the middle portion of your pyramid, maybe 20%, earns a small return with a little bit more risk. Let's say 6-month treasuries right now yielding almost 6%. The top 10% of your pyramid would be the cryptocurrencies, the mining shares, the home run. And I have learned firsthand that a small allocation to mining shares can outperform the rest of your portfolio if you hit it right. The leverage is extraordinary, but they shouldn't be confused with physical metals and mining shares. They are cousins, they are a derivative. One is wealth, one is an investment. I am a fan of them. They are underallocated, they are underowned, and they are undervalued, and they have massive potential. But don't make the mistake of using your mining share portfolio as a substitute for your physical metals. You should own both. One gives you profit, one gives you stability. I like them both.
The other thing that Rick has talked to me about this question is that he picks through, I mean, Rick has a serious work ethic. He's like 60 hours a week kind of guy and has been his whole life. And he knows how to read financial statements, and he knows how to grill the management teams that come in to talk to him, because a lot of companies want to be recommended by Rick, and he doesn't recommend most. He says living in the up in Canada, where the both in Toronto and in Vancouver, those like downtown areas are like just full of offices of mining, exploring, development companies. He said it's like finding needles in a haystack, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000. He's done that work. He's selected the companies that he thinks are at the top of the pile, and he's put them on at the show here. So if you do click on that link at the top of the screen, you'll see the presentations by all of the exhibitors at the show. Those are the ones he selected. So long story short, if you go for an ETF, you're likely to get a big bundle, a basket that's kind of representative of a whole, group of the market of mining shares, that sort of thing, but it doesn't mean they're the best. So think about that as part of what you do. It's something worth thinking about. And the poor man's version of doing that is looking at just follow the link and go look at who the exhibitors were on the symposium, and you won't get to hear their story, but you'll see the list of Rick's favorites. Andy has a giant fan base. Yeah, tell us something we don't know. Let's see.
I will be at the Silver Symposium.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I will be there in
Neil,
Las Vegas.
Andy will be there. Okay.
And really quick, I think Jake is the person who sent me a couple of t-shirts, which I really got a kick out of. Jake, if that's you, I just got them. I know it's been a long time. They were sent to my office. For whatever reason, I hadn't been there for a long time, had some health issues, been traveling, just got them. I love you, man. They're amazing. If you are who I think you are, met you at Bix's show in Austin, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Fazal has another question. How long does Andy think the price suppression can drag on? Or is the price quote increase only going to manifest as premiums on physical metal?
No, absolutely not. You'll see premiums on precious metals rise dramatically when the public wakes up. And maybe that comes when the next regional bank fails and Janet Yellen bails them in instead of out, as the law dictates. And then you'll see what anxiety and fear really is manifested in the public waking up to buy metals, and what that will do to a market that is flush right now, and premiums are low and falling, and availability is great. That'll change in the blink of an eye, and it always has. But I don't believe that you will see price suppression last forever. And I know you want to say something. Give me one second, and that is simply
It'll
this.
still be there.
You can only manipulate or push a market in the direction. You can only suppress a market long enough if you're pushing back against a global tide of demand, you can't do it. You can only suppress or manipulate a market by pushing it in the direction that it is going. And for a very long time, people just wanted dollars. No one wanted gold, but the world is accumulating gold and silver. The central banks bought more over the last 18 months than ever before. You're seeing the same thing with silver. India buying 304 million ounces. The exchanges are being bled dry by the biggest money in the world, and they are using this suppression to run cover for their de-dollarization. And the West, who suppresses the price of gold to support the bond market, to support the theory of a strong dollar, and everything is okay. The one thing they didn't take into account was that the East would be standing with their arms and hands open wide, ready to take delivery at any cost. And that is what is changing the game, to the point where the exchanges are being bled down so much that this game has to end. It has to end very soon, because there's not enough ammunition to continue to short a market naked, where if you're called for delivery, the whole thing blows up. So no, it won't go on forever. Not in a market where the biggest, most sophisticated and well-funded money in the world is taking possession and pulling it off the exchanges. This is very close, I would think, to that moment where we wake up and prices go so much higher we can't believe it.
That leads right into the next question by John. Silver levels still decreasing at COMEX and LBMA?
Yeah, they are. I mean, you see games played with the registered category. Usually when the registered category increases, it means you're going to see some big deliveries coming up in the near future, as the eligible category transfers to the registered. It has to go from eligible to registered in order to be delivered. We're seeing massive open interest right now in the silver market. Expect some very interesting things here in the next few days. But yes, it is on a general trend. The LBMA, the COMEX, the Shanghai Gold Exchange, they're all witnessing massive withdrawals. And I don't see that as a trend that will stop until the exchanges don't allow delivery any longer. And when you look at the LBMA, they came out at the beginning of this year and said, we see deliveries the way we did last year. By the end of 2023, there'll be no silver left. Are we getting that close? It sure seems that way. It's the lowest silver inventory in the 140-year history of the LBMA. And so it's becoming an issue where, here again, you can only manipulate a market by pushing it in the direction it's going. We're getting to the end of the rope. So, you know, when the world understands what's happening to the dollar, when the world sees what the handwriting is on the wall, that gold was reclassified the only other tier 1 asset, it's just a matter of time. And price is the greatest tool in misdirection, and they're using that to their advantage to allow them to drain the exchanges and accumulate.
Follow-up question to our earlier talk. Dan Spain says, hey, Andy, what subject that you spoke on today seemed to raise the most eyebrows and perhaps provoke questions? You told me there was a moment during your talk when you saw people's eyes open up.
Yeah, well, I banged on the podium really loud and talking about what the reset looks like. I talked a lot about the concept of logarithmic decay, which is little by little, then all at once. And it's how Ernest Hemingway went broke. It's how I envision the de-dollarization happening. But I also talked about what's happening to our society, where things, I said in 2020, everyone was freaked out by the pandemic. I was freaked out by censoring. And people's shows that I would go on, before I would go on, they'd say, no, don't mention, you know, the cerveza virus, don't mention the president's son, don't do any of these things because we'll get a strike or get censored. To me, I found that to be very frightening. But things like transgenderism or a cancel culture or climate alarmism or the fact that, you know, I think what really freaked people out is I said, look, people will sail across a violent ocean on a bunch of tires tied together with string to find a better life. They will walk through 1,000 miles of 100-degree heat to find a better life. And I said, do you remember when we all used to say the Pledge of Allegiance? At the end, we would say liberty and justice for all. And I said, how many people believe that to be true anymore? How many people believe that the law is being equally administered to everyone, to the president and or to the former president, or the things that are eroding society from the inside trouble me just as much as what's happening on the outside. And the whole premise of my presentation was this all planned. And I think it started to get people thinking that these things that we're seeing that are in your face right now, they never were, ever. I grew up in a world where you respected everyone. You didn't have to celebrate them. And, you know, when you see these things that are now, if you don't celebrate them, and if you don't
Go along and participate.
yeah, then you're a bad person. And that to me, I think is part and parcel with what's happening to this country. And I think I asked Dunnigan this evening, do you think our foes see that? And they have to. And I think the bottom line is simply this, you know, people have come to this country for a better life because of fairness and equality and justice. And I wonder how many people out there really, truly believe that the Justice Department, the FBI, the institutions that mean so much to this country, that they aren't doing things equally. And to me, that is the erosion of the foundation of this country. And I wanted people to understand this. This isn't about dollars. It just isn't about gold. This is a bigger picture. And you put it all together, all of the pieces, inside, outside, it creates an environment that is pushing the rest of the world away from the United States. And that to me is very frightening and very concerning.
Yeah, that last quote you made there, I think you talked to me about this at supper, was about, is this really the land of liberty and justice for all? You know, liberty and finance is the name of our channel. And when the justice is uneven and people can see it and it's no longer being hidden, they can see the injustice,
Yes.
the unequal justice. I know what I was going to say earlier when you were talking about the panic is going to hit when people realize that it's going to be bail-ins. So folks, if you're not aware, listen up. And if your family's not aware, make sure that you're able to explain this to them, that back in 2010, there was a law called the Dodd-Frank Act that got passed after the whole global financial collapse of 2008 and so on, where at that time, the bailouts supposedly were done on the back of the taxpayer, meaning we're all in, it was just money being shoveled out of, by the Fed out of the Treasury, and we're all on the hook for it. But they said, no, that's not going to happen. It's not going to be on the backs of the taxpayers next time. Next time, it's going to be the banks having to stand on their own, meaning the depositors on the banks will be given a haircut, that the funds, that anything you have deposited in the bank is no longer yours. It's a loan to the bank in case they get in trouble in the future. They can draw on that for operating funds, and you're just a shareholder at the end of the line, unsecured creditor to the bank. So if acquaintances, family members, coworkers aren't aware that when Andy made a question, he goes so fast. He said, which is the law. That is the law. The law now is that if the banks get in trouble, they're going to get bailed out by taking funds from the accounts of the shareholders.
The shareholders are unsecured general creditors. And
excuse me, I didn't mean shareholder, I mean depositors.
Yeah, and they're unsecured general creditors. And when the very famous discussion between the senator from Oklahoma who asked Janet Yellen,
yeah.
will my constituents be bailed out if a bank in Oklahoma fails? And she
Community
said
bank
no.
in specific,
Yes,
yeah.
and she said no. And so what you're looking at, I believe, is bail-in coming on the next bank failure, which will really freak out the public in a massive, massive way, and rightfully so. And when you see people lose virtually everything, you know, you ask yourself a question, these things that are so confusing and so hard to understand. Now, I want you to think about the compliance officer. I want you to think about the regulators. When Silicon Valley Bank was being investigated or questioned, again, by a House committee inquiry, they asked someone, I don't know who they asked, but they asked, so let me get this straight. You had the top 10 depositors in checking accounts had $14 billion and had been there for 3 years. Think about that for a second. For 3 years, there were 10 checking accounts. These are business accounts that had $14 billion in them. Now, ask yourself, who in their right mind, think of compliance, would leave $14 billion amongst 10 accounts in checking accounts at Silicon Valley Bank, where if the bank goes upside down, all of it disappears, earning next to nothing? Why not put the majority of that into even 30 or 60-day treasuries, where you have complete and total safety, no bank risk, no FDIC insurance, none of that stuff. You're backed by the full faith and credit of the US government, paid a return that was, I don't know how many times higher than the next to nothing you were receiving over the last several years in a checking account, and then they were bailed out after the law said that isn't going to happen anymore. Was that meant to get the ball rolling down the hill? I don't know. There are so many things that are happening around us right now that are almost impossible to explain and just bring you down another rabbit hole. But these are the things that I was talking about, and these are very strange and interesting and challenging times to navigate. But what I would simply say to you is that the problems with the banks are not behind us. They hold 70% of all the commercial real estate loans and leases. Lots of them are coming due for refinancing or rolling over here in the third and fourth quarter. That's a recipe for disaster. Most of these loans are what's called non-recourse, meaning they can just say, bye, here are the keys, I'm out. I'm incorporated, you can't do anything about it, I'm going bankrupt. We just saw a big complex in Atlanta. Bye, I left. We saw the ones in San Francisco. Well, the banks are the ones that are going to take it on the chin, putting further strain on the system. And when one of these big banks goes down, I promise you, she's going to bail them in this time. And when that happens, Miles Franklin and all of our associates added 14,000 clients in 4 months. Excuse me, 14,000 clients in 45 days, pardon me, during April and March. And it's been a long day, pardon me. I've been here since 7 in the morning and it's 9:30 at night. But the point is, these were banks that were bailed out. What's going to happen when you see 1 or 2 get bailed in and people lose everything? This is a situation that can't be ignored, and I don't think we've seen the end of it. And if I had to guess, the third and fourth quarter are going to see some more bank failures. In fact, Janet told us herself that expect more consolidations into the fourth quarter.
We've got a question here. I guess it's a follow-up about the Brics currency. Fasdal is good at reiterating the question that Aquazyme said. It may be gold backed, but is it gold redeemable? She says, will this Brics currency be redeemable in physical gold, or is this just going to be another fakey fiat, which means nothing?
Yeah, I don't think it will be redeemable, but the way that you can address that is to use blockchain and have it audited. I think President de Gaulle from France proved that, and Gresham's law proves that good money chases out bad, but de Gaulle proved that convertible currencies convert. And I think instead what you do is you use blockchain to prove the immutability and the veracity of what's there. You have it audited by independent auditors. Heck, the West trusted the auditors to go into the Iranian nuclear facilities and say all is okay. So why can't we trust auditors, independent auditors, several of them, in an attempt to prove indeed that what is being held on the blockchain is actually there? I do not believe it will be redeemable, but I do believe it will be backed with the veracity and the immutability of that on a blockchain. And to me, it inspires a whole hell of a lot more trust than a system that is opaque, based upon debt, and no transparency. So no, I don't believe it will be redeemable, but they will address that through using blockchain.
We've got a question here. John says, Andy or DK, any thoughts on grains with gold, silver, and Brics? Big topic in Idaho.
No idea.
I mean, you're talking about wheat, like talking about grains being traded for gold and silver, or you're talking about grains of gold? Because that's been something that came out when we interviewed Dr. Edwin Vieira, constitutional attorney and expert on hard currency, about how you could certainly do commerce in small quantities of gold.
I do know that I was wholly impressed with the representative from Idaho who stood on the legislative floor and said, we need to allow our constituents to do what the central banks are doing to get away from the madness of the Federal Reserve and to protect themselves with gold and silver. And I know that they have put into their legislature or into their state constitution that gold and silver coins minted by a sovereign mint would be used as legal tender. I find that to be incredible, and I really admire and respect those states that are taking this overture, Idaho being one of them. I'm assuming he means something to that extent. And hey, I think that's the pushback that we need to wake up the public, into understanding exactly the difference between money and currency, and exactly what's happening to our currency, to our system.
We've got a question here. I think this iterates what you said. Paul Holinsky said, I actually saw a guy from a great Alaskan gold company that explained the other question. Metals is to preserve purchasing power, but is not a wealth creator. The mining shares are a wealth creator.
Yeah, well, physical metals are wealth. Mining shares are an investment. You can make a lot of money. They are related to each other, but they're not the same. I agree completely.
Let's see. Any other questions? I see you've got a lot here, guys. We're looking through these to pick out the next one.
Dan Aykroyd. Oh my goodness.
Mistaken for
No.
Okay. Now we've had a lot of questions coming up about Platinum Eagles. Price on Platinum Eagles with delivery. I can look that up on our price sheet, but as far as the question on how have Platinum Eagles been selling recently?
Not really much at all. In fact, since 2008, the Platinum Eagles have been very, very hard to come by. You hardly see them. They're minted in very, very small quantities, and they really are a very, very, very small part of what we do. I think platinum is a intriguing story based upon the relationship between gold and platinum, but really it's kind of been a forgotten metal. And when you realize its main uses are in catalytics for diesel automobiles, I think that the world looks to gold and silver for wealth preservation, and platinum is somewhat forgotten, but has a compelling story. We really just don't do much of it whatsoever.
So I see on our most recent price sheet that just came out the other day, Platinum Eagles 1 ounce backdated are at 165 over spot. So that's a guideline for those out there. Let's see. However, the fiat will have more strength compared to the dollar. That's an interesting question. Thanks for the donation, Twisted Clown. Appreciate it. Andy, when is the website up? Stay healthy, my friends.
Well, so the website is up. We haven't announced it yet. There are a lot of things that are being done to it. As I've told everyone, it's been an awful experience. It's up. We are integrating the tax software into it within the next week or so. And the tax software, there are several states. I'll give you an example. My home state of Florida here, we sell tons of metal in Florida, but Florida has a law that says if you buy, I think, under $2,000, it has to be taxed. Well, we've never been set up with the states to pay taxes and file tax returns in these states as you're mandated to do, because we would just tell people it's got to be over 2,000 or we can't take it. So on the website, it says you can't buy in the state of Florida or in the state of California yet. The website is up, let's call it 0.1 or 1.0. There'll be many changes to it over the next several weeks, that being one of them. But if you're in one of the states where you are allowed to purchase with, or there are no taxes, I should say, then it is up and operational.
We've had two questions related to this. One from Jason Arnold says, can someone ask Andy, when will the bullion dealers no longer be able to accept fiat in exchange for gold? The one earlier said, when CBDCs come out, how are we going to be able to buy precious metals?
Whatever, look, I mean, whatever the currency of the realm is, will be. I guess maybe if the dollar lost all value altogether, we have bigger problems. And if no one's taking dollars, we have bigger problems. We use dollars to buy gold from our distributors, from the mints and the refineries, and we accept dollars in order to pay for that stuff. I don't know. I mean, I don't think there will ever be a time until we're out of business where you're not able to accept currency, whether it's a CBDC or FedNow or just plain old dollars by a wire, until that system changes. And let's hope that it doesn't, because the bigger question is, what does the world look like when no one is accepting dollars for anything of value?
And when will states start issuing metal-backed currencies? It's a good question. You were talking about some states are standing up more than others. There's a website, actually, I'll find it again here. I think I've held it up before, but there's a website that compares all 50 states in a color map by several criteria about how they're standing up for sound money. And you can imagine it's things like places like Texas, South Dakota, Idaho and some who are kind of leading the pack, and you can imagine who the worst offenders are that aren't doing anything about it. But I'll see if I can pull that up. I'll get you going on another question while I look up the answer to that one. Sarge says, but the U.S. Constitution says that only gold and silver can be money. Why don't we just, how about we just follow the Constitution?
Yeah, it actually says it's treasonous to issue anything besides money that is, I think they call it species, gold and silver. But yeah, I mean, we've so far deviated from the Constitution. It's only a tool when it makes sense or handy for the politicians to refer to it. But we've deviated from that for almost 100 years. But I think we're heading back in that direction when you see 24 states introduce legislation to accept it. And if you read the legislation, these states are saying that the legal tender coins that could be used as a medium of exchange for all debts, public and private, would be the melt value plus any market premium. So, you know, you are entering a period of time where you have greater acceptance by the states into precious metals right at the same time that the CBDCs are going to be rolled out. The Bank of International Settlements said by 2025, every country has to have an operational CBDC. The number 2 person at the White House in terms of the economic advisors, Lael Brainerd, not only is somewhat of the front person for FedNow, but she's also been working with, I believe, MIT in developing the new CBDC that is coming. So, you know, these are very, very interesting times, to say the least, and things are changing. So I guess you just got to roll with it best you can.
One of the websites, guys, that answers the question about where we're going to see leadership on precious metals as sound money, you can go to the Sound Money Defense League.
Yeah,
and that's
Money
a good
Metals.
place, soundmoneydefense.org. So take a look at that. And
yeah, the guy that owns Money Metals is a very solid stand-up guy. And
Johnny Boy says Money Metals is building a huge vault in Idaho.
I'd like to have a beer with him one night. I think he's a good guy.
And okay, we have a comment here from Trump JJ 2020 says, do you think Brics will call a price for gold to back their currency? That there was some comments today about gee, the banks are in tough shape, the countries are in tough shape. If they revalued gold significantly high enough, they could say that they're solvent.
It's interesting. If you look at the balance sheets of all of the central banks, gold is held in an account called the revaluation account. I don't know, that seems kind of interesting that they would call it the revaluation account on their balance sheets. And that is the theory. In fact, I think it was one of the politicians, I want to say the Dutch politician, who came out and said just that if we were to raise gold high enough or revalue it high enough, our balance sheet would be then, you know, solid and our assets would meet our liabilities. That's one of the things that ultimately, you know, when guys like Jim Sinclair, maybe even James Rickards says gold will go to as high as 10,000 and never come back down, it would be revalued. It would be pegged to a new system to back the currency. Why else would Basel III call it tier 1, the only other tier 1 asset in the world, if not to be part of a system? Well, in order to back a currency, and even if it's only 10 or 15% backing, gold's got to go to a level that's much, much, much higher. And this, to me, explains a lot on top of the revaluation why the central banks have been massively accumulating it, and more than any time and ever, really, in over the last 18 months. So it will play a role, and it will probably be revalued, and it will back a system, because no one's ever going to trust the fiat system again if it doesn't have backing. Well, people say, well, if it's not redeemable, is it just another fiat? My answer to that is that's exactly what blockchain will do. It will alleviate the need for that. Now, maybe it is redeemable by the countries, but it won't be like it was in 33 when you could walk into a bank with a $20 gold certificate and exchange it for a $20 gold coin. I think it will only, if at all, be redeemable for the countries who pledge it to take it back out.
We have a question here from Jim Montgomery. Andy, your thoughts on life in Florida this far?
Best thing I ever did in my life. I left Minnesota, a place I was so proud of, a place I was so happy to be from. Never wanted to move.
When I visited you, you said you never would.
I said I would never move. And I came down here and immediately it just it was the craziest thing I've ever done in my life. I've never done anything that spontaneous. And I came down for a vacation during Silver Squeeze. I spent 10 days in a bedroom on the phone or doing interviews, literally never left except for one day to come across the state to Delray to look at a house or several houses, because the governor in Minnesota raised the state income tax top bracket to 10% or thereabouts after shutting us down, locking us down in ways that I thought were as bad as in any state in the country. And I came down here and thought I was on a different planet. And on top of that, he raises income tax. And I said, I'm never going back. And I will tell you, honestly, it's one of the best things I've ever done in my life. I think I'll never look back. I'll always be a Minnesotan at heart, but I'll never look back in terms of making the move.
You mentioned that there was a cultural difference too, about people's level of being willing to, or not having to bow down to constraints and restrictions and that kind of thing. And then this more kind of lively culture you found down here.
Very much so. I drove down Atlantic Avenue on our way to look at one of the houses, and I said to my wife, where the hell are we? I mean, we left, everything was closed and people were wearing masks. I drive
in
down,
Minneapolis.
In Minneapolis, and I drive down Atlantic Avenue in Delray Beach, and there are live bands and people drinking and dancing outside like nothing had ever happened. And it just rained over me like, you have to stay. And the toughest thing for me to do was to call my best friend. It felt like I was breaking up with my girlfriend from high school. And but other than that, and missing friends and some family, it was the best thing I've ever done in my life. People who are struggling, if they're in a blue state, all I can tell you is that it really truly has been liberating on many levels.
These two may come together. John DiLiberto says, looking forward to witnessing the BIS, quote, masters of the universe, quote, give an account before the Most High. And anonymous user says, I have a great deal of respect for both of you gentlemen. Unfortunately, my impression is currently that of a revolution being inevitable. For far too long, we have ignored the corruption. We were just talking about that at supper.
Yeah, I agree with that. It is inevitable. And I think it is, we've crossed the line of no return. And thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it very much. I said some things today that I wondered if they were a little too far, because we have crossed that line. And there are very few people who want to stand up and speak the truth. And I don't know, there's some guy out there who calls me a shill. Obviously, this guy wouldn't have the courage to say it to my face, and he hides behind a keyboard like a tough guy. That's cool. I don't got a problem with that. I'm the farthest thing from a shill. I don't need to be doing this. And yet I stand up at Rick Rule's conference with some of the biggest names in North America. And I say what I say, and I say what I say here. And no one else has been saying this stuff for 4 years. I have. And I told Dunnigan tonight, I don't know why I say it. I don't know why I do. I just do. And it's a weird thing. I can't explain it. And a lot of the stuff I talk about, even some of the stuff I was talking about on the stage today, just come to me. And as an example, I was talking about today on the stage, came to me, I never thought about it, about the debt. And I said, look, we have a $32 trillion debt and $125 trillion in unfunded liabilities, 156 or so trillion dollars in debt with 5 trillion in assets. And I thought to myself right there, I'm like, but wait, all these unfunded liabilities are owed to who? They're owed to us. They're owed to the United States, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, government military pensions. And when they do default, and I said, they're finding a villain. That villain was Xi Jinping and OPEC and Putin. They're the ones who will be blamed for Saudi Arabia and OPEC and the rest of the Brics moving away from the dollar and the dollar settlement for oil. They'll blame them when it was our fault for creating more money in 4 years and suppressing interest rates than this world has ever seen, creating these distortions and these misallocations. And anyways, the bottom line is I said, look, it's much easier to default, to call everyone into a handful of banks when the banks blow up and issue a CBDC and say, hey, you're all okay. Don't worry. You'll get your Social Security, you'll get your Medicare, your Medicaid, and your pensions. Sign on the dotted line on this new CBDC. The majority of the debt is owed to us. So if you're going to default, might as well fault on us and make it good to us. The rest of the world, well, you know what, that's the way the game is played. So it's a scary time, and I don't know how this all plays out, but I will tell you, I think we are on the precipice of finding out very, very soon.
No worries. This is a great one from Ken D. He says, I got the same thing, truth compulsion. In an era of lies, it wears on you.
It does. And I said to Dunnigan, I don't know, you know, like I was the guy talking about manipulation at the Agora conference 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago, when Doug Casey told me, got up on stage right after me and said, hey, you know, JP Morgan would never manipulate the market. Their traders could never keep their mouth shut long enough, and pretty much publicly embarrassed me. But look what happened. You know, JP Morgan came out and was issued a $920 million fine for doing just that. I said it. I will always say what I believe. I will always be straight. And I don't know why. I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't know why I'm putting myself out on the internet saying these things. People came up to me today and said, you better be careful. You know, you might be on a list. Maybe I am. Try to be respectful in what I do. I try to base things on fact. I try not to be emotional. I try not to call people names or institutions names. I just simply say, this is what I see happening. I hope I'm wrong. And I always say, I hope I'm wrong. I don't think I am, but when you see what is happening in this country inside, like I said, you know, the main financial or the main economic advisor to this country is Jared Bernstein, whose main thesis is removing the world reserve status. And I said, what better way to do that than antagonizing Saudi Arabia, which is the linchpin of the hegemony of the United States, and weaponizing the dollar? If you had to draw up a plan to destroy the dollar's world reserve status, the first thing you would do would be to anger and alienate Saudi Arabia, who for 50 years we've protected for that dollar hegemony, and then weaponize the dollar and make everyone in the world think twice about owning them and holding them and stockpiling them. What better way? And, you know, I don't know how many people would say that publicly at a place where you have James Rickards and Danielle DiMartino Booth and Nomi Prince and Bill Bonner and Rick Rule, and these names that you don't hear people saying this stuff. And I don't know why I'm doing it, but I believe in my heart I'm right, and I try to do it respectfully.
Rolf Steiner adds, he says, Don Freeze, the thing freaking yelling out is that if other nations get wise to this, you said when are the outsiders going to notice we're crumbling from within, get wise to this, they might start dumping the U.S. debt and assets. So that's another piece of the puzzle that you've talked about, is that the risk to us in the U.S. of the rest of the world seeing the weakness, the moral weakness, the spiritual weakness, the political weakness, the weakness of dishonesty, etc., loss of integrity within our country.
That to me is bigger than the mismanagement of the currency. I mean, people trust the United States because of that, of the foundation of trust and liberty and free enterprise and freedom of speech, and those things have all of a sudden been eroded little by little, then all at once. That is logarithmic decay, and it's happening. And I think the world sees that, and it accentuates and validates their belief about the weaponization of the dollar and the intentions of the United States. And, you know, you look at a country like the US, those countries that are moving away look at us as being very hypocritical. And we can go into a country like Iraq and destroy it under the guise of weapons of mass destruction, say, we're sorry, we didn't find it, and everything's okay. Well, you know, in Iraq, they don't think it's okay. They just made trading in dollars illegal. If you own a business and trade in dollars, you'll go to jail and lose your business. So I guess what I'm simply saying is that the world looks at us as being hypocritical. The world looks at what's happening inside our country and sees decay in morality, in justice, in liberty, all of the things that have made this country what it is. And that's why you have to ask yourself, I mean, you know, was this intended? Are they that foolish to continue to do these things inside and out that will precipitate these feelings and this coalition of countries moving against the dollar? And it's hard for me to say no. No, I think it is. They know what they're doing. They want to reset this whole system. There is no way out of 150 trillion in debt without without default. Richard Russell always used to say inflate or default. I'm going to add a third piece to that, and it's inflate or default or find a villain. And I think that villain is what they are trying to do, that gives them the ability to default and point to a villain that takes everyone that was responsible for this off the hook.
You're going to love this little sequence here. I'm going to read them all in a row. As far as being on a list, Homer Talk says, you're on Santa's list. Another, Don Free says, God assigned you, Andy. And Original Intent says, don't be afraid of being on a list. I have been since 1992. And John DiLiberto says, if you're not on a list by now, what are you even doing with your life? That's a very good call to arms for all people, all free people, but especially men. I'm going to put the charge out there. I indict myself first for having been too timid, too passive, and too, I guess, reluctant to speak up, speak out. We're here obviously trying to get the word out, but Andy's been doing so much of the heavy lifting. It's time for the rest of us to join in. So
well, I appreciate all of that. And, it freaks me out a little bit. I'm just, I look at myself as an average guy. I do. My wife says to me all the time, if these people only knew what you were really like outside of this, and who are you on these podcasts? I don't even know who you are. Everyone's supposed to do their part. And I fell into this, and I don't, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I've done 1,200 YouTube videos over almost 4 years, and do the math, that's almost every day. Some I've done 6 or 7, 8, 9, 10 in a day. And I don't know. I was never in my mind qualified to do this. I research constantly. I talk to all my clients. I literally cannot shut my brain off. I work 18 hours a day. I've been here since 7 in the morning. I was up at 5:30. I was up at 5:30 yesterday. I had 2 speeches. I have to come back tomorrow and do the same thing. I got to drive 40 minutes home. But I love it. And it's what I'm supposed to be doing. And got into an argument with my wife tonight. She says, you can't stay there. You can't stay there. Go do it from home. I said, no, I promised Dunnigan I would stay here. I would do it. I'm a man of my word. Got into an argument with her, a fight with her. I don't even know what I'm trying to say. Simply, this is what I said to Dunnigan tonight. So much of this is a mystery to me, but I know I'm supposed to say it because no one else is saying it. And to me, it's so clear. It's so obvious that it's killing me to not say it. And coming here and talking to you, it's cathartic to me, because you can't say this stuff to most people. They think you're out of your mind. Yet in 30 years of being in this industry, nothing has ever happened as fast as this has. And I've never called things like this. I mean, I would say things, they would happen years after, because it's math and it's economics.
but here it's in real time.
Here it's in real time.
And we're also, I think we're all living that, because you broaden the scope far, far beyond just the financial edifice that's under remodeling right before our eyes, because we're all living the same thing. We're seeing the destruction of the values of our country. We used to say the Pledge of Allegiance in school. You were the one who brought that up to me this morning. We used to have a border. We used to have families with mom and the dad and the kids, and that was supported by the country. People used to work. I mean, go down the list, just keep going. You used to be able to believe some of the newscasts that and on and on. So we're losing the credibility and the trust of so many of our institutions so fast, you can't even count them anymore.
Well, and it's happened gradually, and now it's just in your face and everyone accepts it. That is the concept of logarithmic decay. It ends civilizations and it ends empires. And
that was just spoken to us in the hallway. One of our
it's true.
People greeted us and said, this is the way that empires.
It's true. I mean, I'm 52 years old. I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, and it was a wonderful time. And the stuff that we see now, I can't believe it. And it freaks me out well more than the mismanagement of the reserve currency. And I think it all is part and parcel. And I think that's why I flock to something solid like gold and silver, because it can be manipulated until it can't. It's real. And we live in a world of illusion, it seems these days, and make believe. So to me, that's part of the reason I like gold and silver so much, because I can trust it.
Yeah. Trump JJ 2020 says, because you're a pure heart, God's warrior hero. And there was one more down here I wanted to see if we could work on, and that is, let's see, Rolf Steiner says, if I found out you were planning a US currency devaluation, I'd be dumping. It's like, well, that is what is going on. That's, I interviewed, you'll see, if you look back at our most recent interview published yesterday on Liberty and Finance, Monday, it was a Series 7 qualified financial planner who left the system. He said, I couldn't take it anymore. I wasn't telling people, I wasn't being allowed to tell people what they needed to hear, and I was being told to tell people what they didn't need to hear. And it made him sick to be inside the belly of the beast. And so many financial planners find themselves constrained that they can't tell the truth to their people, that if they know, they can't speak up about it, and they can't really help people. So he said in the intro to our video, he said, inflation is theft, inflation is theft. That the so-called 2% target of inflation that really end up being 8 to 14% is direct theft from people's earnings, savings, and retirement. So so our currency is not just planning a devaluation, it is in the process
But
of
even
devaluation.
2%, why have a 2%?
No,
You should have a negative 2%. The lower the
2% theft
inflation,
target, yeah.
well, the lower the inflation, the higher the standard of living. You know, can you imagine any CEO of a company standing on a stage and saying the goal of our company is to lose 2% per year?
Right.
I mean, it's just dumb. And this is
It's worse
just,
than dumb, right?
yeah.
It's too dumb to, it must be on purpose.
Right, and that's the part of everyone accepting it, and it's just dumb, and they just accept it as being normal.
Well, I know we're just about at the end of the hour here. Trying to ask, you've been responding generously to everyone's questions. Was there something that you brought with you into this hour that you'd like to share with the viewers that we haven't already covered?
I guess not really. I mean, we talked about it already. To me, the biggest part of what's happening at this meeting in Johannesburg, if they walk away with the combination of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the Eurasian Economic Union with the Brics, it's getting really, really, really real, really fast. And when you realize that Saudi Arabia will, in essence, be protected by 2 of the 3 largest nuclear arsenals in the world, and partnering with up to 85 to 90% of human population, along with all of the OPEC countries on the Belt Road, there will come a Sunday night, Monday morning, when they say we're no longer taking dollars. And when that happens, it will become a religious experience. That needs to be added into the BRICS story. That's what people are missing. To me, it is far more relevant than the entire BRICS cohesion. It is actually put together, makes the BRICS cohesion really formidable. If all oil sales globally by the largest oil cartel in the world start selling it in currencies other than the dollar, and the dollar is dumped, you'll understand what hyperinflation and spiked interest rates mean. It's the Great Reset. Stocks, bonds, and real estate are all inversely correlated to that moment. And what better way to incite that than to weaponize the dollar and to tell Saudi Arabia we're going green and we don't need you anymore? It's coming. And I think it's very evident if you open your eyes. And that to me is the whole premise of what I've been talking about here, because the pushback that you're seeing, and everyone who talks about BRICS is saying, well, you know, who trusts Russia and China? It's not going to happen. And if it does, it won't be that big of a deal immediately. It will make a dent, but it's a settlement currency. It's not a reserve currency. Well, what's the difference between settlement and reserve? Reserve means you have a bond market. So the bond market in the United States was formulated really during World War II by war bonds, support the troops, the rallying cry, the patriotism. Well, what better way to issue a bond market? James Rickards said the same thing. Amongst the majority of human population on a commodity-backed currency pushing back against the Western hegemony, there's your patriotism. But the erosion of the settlements of dollars, all of these trades in dollar, in energy, in dollars, and in other things like the Brazil-China for corn deal. The second largest producer of corn in the world is selling everything to China in yuan. All of these things used to settle in dollars, which erodes the value of the dollar, which over time will erode the reserve status of the dollar. And when that happens, and all of these countries rather, are aligned in unison with a gold-backed currency, it'll be very easy for them to issue a bond market as our currency starts to lose demand and utility. And so it's coming. It'll be in stages. So I think to look at the BRICS as a settlement currency is fair. And it'll be a darn good settlement currency that the majority of the world will be using instead of the US dollar, which will go from a settlement reserve currency into a piece of history, maybe. And I think it won't happen immediately, but it will happen, and Saudi Arabia has a lot to do with it.
Well, folks, you guys have been just a passionate audience. I see that the rate at which questions are getting asked is actually speeding up as we're hitting the end of the hour here. So I'm sorry we're going to have to wrap, but it's always a treasure to be with you all. We got to get Andy home so we can get some rest, for crying out loud. But thank you,
My
Andy.
brain's not working real good tonight. I apologize. I'm usually a little bit more coherent, but
It's been a long.
it's been a long couple of days. I
So-
appreciate all of you very, very much. And even the guy that called me a shill, I don't care. I appreciate it. At least he's watching, but thank you. And Dunnigan, thank you. And I'll be back next Tuesday, and I'll be back every Tuesday as long as I can to see this through with everyone, because I think it's going to get real interesting over the next several months into the election in 2024. It's going to become extraordinarily exciting. So buckle up, you guys. I think you're going to need it.
That's one more thing. We didn't mention a weekly special. Sorry, guys. I forgot to bring that up. I don't have any graphics to show really.
I think
cleverly.
it's Silver Eagles at $7.99 2023s, and they're still too expensive in my book. They should be lower than that. I think they will be shortly. Don't know how long that'll last. I love the Silver Eagle. I do. I think there are better values out there. So special is still not really a special in my mind. Wait a little bit, it'll go lower. There are really good values out there, though. Really good. Maple Leafs and Philharmonics and Britannias and bars. There's a million good things out there to buy. And
that's the other thing you've always reminded us, is that when you can get things and the premiums are low is the time to at least take a bite, because by the time it becomes obvious that the turn has happened and things are back off to the races again because of whatever event, then good luck.
well, look, Dunnigan, I could say that, but you've been with me now for 2 years and you've seen it yourself.
This has happened multiple
Yeah,
times.
it does. And it's like the
Yeah.
blink of an eye, it changes.
Yeah.
You see a bank fail.
Well, I was just going to mention, somebody emailed us just before we got started here tonight. PacWest, PACW, look it
Yep.
up. They lost 27% of their value in the last couple hours.
Well, that's just it. You see a bank like PacWest fail and Janet lets them get bailed in and people lose all their money. You watch and see what happens to this environment and to this market and to the premiums and to the availability like that. It's gone. It'll change, and it does every time. What I consider flush is just a pittance when you talk about the amount of money out there, and most of that is because of people like you. Wait till the mainstream is so freaked out they think they're going to lose everything. And where else do you go right now? I don't know.
Once all again, thank you, Andy, for joining us, especially at this late hour. Thank you all for being there this week and every week. And if you want to pick up, somebody was bringing this up earlier, if you want to see Andy's full speech that just riveted the audience, they came out, there was a crowd following him out of the auditorium. If you want to see that, there's a link right at the top of your chat there. You can get access to the all the recordings from all the Rule Symposium seminars for the next, this one, for the next 6 months, including Andy's 2.
Yeah, my head was much better placed. It was firing much faster than it is now, but
All right.
told you I'd be here. So anyways, everyone have
Very
a good
good.
one. We'll see you next week.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Hey, that's it.
So we have